Orders with no tip may take longer to get delivered. Are you sure you want to continue? Were any of you the recipient of this notification from DoorDash last year? Imagine this. You go to your favorite coffee shop and you go get your favorite latte. You go up to pay and bam, you get a screen that asks for a 20 to 30% tip. How does that make you feel? And that may be a common situation that we're familiar with. But for some people, it can be a little bit of a problem. It's a little bit frustrating for people to figure out when should I tip, how much should I tip, or am I tipping in a place that I wasn't expecting? As an instructor of consumer behavior, we are seeing a big shift in consumer sentiment towards suggested tips. And the conversation around DoorDash started to swirl about looking at what is the role of the consumer to subsidize drivers' pay. And we're starting to see headlines like this everywhere, that tipping culture is out of control, tipping backlash is happening. We're seeing Facebook posts and TikTok stitches. So what is it about tipping that has people so confused and so frustrated? Let's start with why people tip in the first place. And 77% of people report that they tip as a reflection of the service that they receive. And COVID was a big turning point for how we started tipping, or how we changed our tipping behaviors. With stay-at-home orders, more people were tipping generously because of that added value of somebody risking their health in order to provide a service. And that led to a culture of over-tipping. And that is really hard to roll back the clock on once we have already entered that culture. And there's kind of 4 big reasons that people are so frustrated or so confused. And the first of those is generally social pressure. Tip jars are something that we used to see on counters all the time, but they could be easily overlooked. And now that's just not the case anymore. Point-of-sale systems make it so much easier to ask for a tip no matter where you are or what business you're in. And businesses have started to push us into these higher tipping amounts. We call that tipflation. And that is frustrating for people trying to balance their own personal budgets. 34% of people report being annoyed by these pre-filled tip screens. There are some unintended consequences with this. 14% of people report that they will tip more. 25% report that they will tip less. So this is a problem when it comes to trying to get tips and trying to get that generosity out of people. These screens can also feel a little bit deceptive when they offer you a dollar amount instead of a percentage. If mental math is not your strongest suit, like it isn't for me, this can be a little anxiety-inducing at the checkout register to figure out what is the right amount that I should tip. And oftentimes, we don't want to hold up the line behind us to enter a custom amount or take the time to figure out that percentage, so we might just tap on a value. We also have situations like this, where you as the consumer have some sort of rating tied to you. So for instance, Uber, where you do have a rating as a customer. You might feel the pressure to tip a little bit more just to make sure you maintain that good rating. Another is tip creep. And tip creep is this idea, that 3 out of 5 Americans feel like they are tipping in more places today than they were 5 years ago. And that is a big concern for people. Are we tipping at kiosks and self-checkout stations and different apps? What am I tipping at a self-checkout station for? Where is that tip going? And I recently had this situation. I needed some photos edited, and if you've never used Fiverr, Fiverr is a place where you can connect with an independent contractor and negotiate a price for having that work done. And so I needed about 15 minutes worth of editing, and we agreed on $20 for this job. And so we go through, and I get my images, and I leave my review, and then I get this pop-up that is asking for a tip. These are the suggested tip prices on a $20 order. Not only that, it says that it is customary to tip. That's a lot of pressure, and I am also being rated as a seller on that particular site. So what do? A third situation is bill inflation. We know that we're seeing inflation across the board on all things in the economy right now. But we're also seeing an increase in processing fees and service fees being passed on to the customer. So for instance, I pay for an annual grocery subscription service to my house. So I'm paying to have groceries delivered. Does that mean I also have to tip the driver? It turns out that I do. But what am I paying that subscription fee for if I'm also tipping on every order that's delivered to my house? Another example, we went to a restaurant this summer with my family, and we got the bill, and it had that big QR code on the bottom. Super convenient to check out. You scan it, pay at the table. But it had a 3% processing fee on it, so we're thinking, all right, that's the convenience of using the app. So the server comes over, we give a credit card and run it as normal. And when she comes back, that fee is still there. It turns out that that fee is the credit card fee that the restaurant used to absorb, and now it's passed on to the consumer. But your menu price didn't come down. So those added fees make that extra discretionary tip feel even more like a burden. This is an interesting example because we know that food delivery apps are particularly complicated with their fees. So this is the exact same order from the same restaurant that I built just minutes apart on 2 separate apps on my phone. And these look wildly different in the way that they present the numbers, but they also calculate my 20% tip differently. One of them is calculating it on the bottom line total, and one is calculating it on the subtotal. So now I need to even find the right delivery app provider to get takeout when that's what I was ordering takeout for in the first place, was that I needed my evening to be easy. And now I need to look at which apps to order that food from. And the last big reason people are so frustrated is just general pricing transparency. We know that there is a tip minimum wage when we go into a restaurant. But what about delivery drivers? How are they compensated? We know that they use their own cars, and we know that sometimes they cover their own insurance. We see that there's a delivery fee on a lot of our apps, but there's a caveat that says that doesn't go to the driver. So where is it going? We know we're paying them, we just don't know what's happening. Even with a tipped wait staff in a restaurant, how are cash tips allocated versus credit card tips? How about that 3% processing fee? It's all very confusing, and we don't know where our money is going as a consumer. And it's really culminating into some unclear rules on tipping. And these are some of the stats that we see out of research, that 72% of people say they are expected to tip in more places. 2 out of 3 Americans say that they don't know if they should tip or how much to tip. And so that is leading to this situation where we know we should tip in a sit-down restaurant, but what about a coffee shop, fast food, food trucks, or even Fiverr? What are we supposed to do? And so people are going to decide if they need to tip on the value or the service itself, the delivery service. Do you tip by the mile? This isn't how consumers think about tipping, but it's how we've had to start thinking about it. So what does the future of tipping look like? It's not likely businesses are going to stop asking for tips anytime soon. Those point-of-sale systems just make it too easy for them to incorporate. But if they don't address tipping fatigue, people are going to tip less or not at all. They're going to set their own rules on where they will and won't tip, and they're going to choose their own percentage rates. Oftentimes, we had kind of standard expectations on tipping that 15% was for good service, 20% for excellent service. Now you're going to get a much wider range of what people are comfortable with. And some companies are trying to help. Domino's, for instance, has a You Tip, We Tip campaign, where if you tip $3 or more on an online order, they will give you $3 off of your order the following week. So it helps to lessen the burden on the consumer and also gain customer loyalty at the same time. So it's not just about the numbers. That feeling you're having at checkout, that widespread frustration with tipping, that's absolutely normal. Everybody is feeling that. But what can you do about it? It isn't just about the numbers. It's about showing your appreciation. We have to balance our social expectations with our personal budgets. And so what you can do, take the time to find out the amount that you should tip. It is your money. It is your choice. Take that time. You're not holding up the line, and decide what you're comfortable with. It's like tipping the power back into your own hands. And please remember to tip your presenters. Thank you.